A few hours ago, the news broke that legendary film critic Roger Ebert has passed away. This was just 2 days after he announced a leave of presence, is how he put it, which meant he was lessening his workload, but wasn't disappearing altogether because he found out that he had a reoccurrence of cancer. But I'm here with my co-hosts Jerry and Dean. Okay, so Roger Ebert's passed away at the age of 70. What's most shocking about it is how sudden it was, because like I said, he just announced 2 days ago he was lessening his workload, and now we're faced with this.
Right.
It's very surprising.
Yeah.
It is. But it's a good time to assess his placement in not only film criticism but film culture, because very few figures have loomed larger in the past 30, 40 years than Roger Ebert.
Right.
So when I say Roger Ebert, Dean, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Well, I mean, I just have to, say, personally, what an inspiration he was for me, both he and Gene Siskel, watching what I knew as sneak previews, but which became at the movies since I was 12 years old or so. I think I stumbled upon that show. It was playing on PBS, and I said, "Man, this is the show for me."
Yeah,
and it really sort of just introduced me to just the pure and simple notion of being someone who commented on films, wrote about films as being a choice that I could make it as a career, so that's the first thing I think of. The second thing I think of is just his amazing ability to just get at the heart of what makes something work, and his broad sort of appreciation of so many kinds of movies also really influenced me. He was able to love something, like a Bergman film or Kurosawa's Ran or Showa with just as much vigor as he could, some, lower kind of action movie or, a dumb comedy or whatever, because he was able, like Siskel, to accept those movies on their own terms. And there wasn't just this broad sort of notion of just like, okay, well, just good and bad, but there was gray areas in there that I think that both of those men, but particularly Ebert, were able to illuminate. So
a little bit later on, not last year, but 2011, we did a show, Jerry, you and Chris and I, about the legacy of Siskel and Ebert.
Right.
And we'll close the show tonight. It's about a 30-minute segment with that conversation, and that includes clips from some of their most colorful reviews that they did on the show. And what a wonderful sense of chemistry they had together.
Yeah.
And Owen Daly in the chat room says, when I think of Ebert, I think of a survivor. And that's certainly the case. I mean, even today, on the day of his death, 5 new reviews posted on his site. The Place Beyond the Pines, Evil Dead, Trance, Upstream Color, Room 237,
right.
Jurassic Park 3D. I mean, he was so prolific, and there's something about his existence after Siskel passed, where I do think he became his own entity entirely, because they separately. And we mentioned this on the clip that we end the show with. Separately, they were not as prescient in the minds of people as they were together.
Right.
But following Siskel's death, Ebert, I mean, his writing increased tenfold, and he really engaged with people in the social media in a very special way. and he became his own entity, like I said, which hadn't existed as much when he was combined with Siskel. Jerry, what about you? What's the main quality that you think about when you think about Ebert?
Well, he wasn't condescending. He never insulted the reader or the viewer. I mean, they really sort of, both of them, I think really took film criticism, if you want to even call it that. I think they're more than film critics. I think they're very much cultural essayists, really, because they talked more about than just film when they wrote about it and just in conversations and everything. They became almost, basically, as Dean was saying, not only a career path that you could have, but this was a way that you could use movies as a way to, more so than I think even Pauline Kael did, because Pauline Kael, I think it became obvious by the 80s, became very disenchanted with movies. They never became disenchanted. They always found the good. And they had fun with the bad. Let's not forget when it was on sneak previews, and I think it was even at the movies, they had the dog of the week or whatever. They would have these little, and they knew how to have fun with it. They weren't stuffy. They really, I think they, how should I say it? They demystified. They threw the whole notion of the snobby film critic on its head, really, because they appealed to everybody, and everyone knew who they were. I mean, they would go on the Tonight Show, the Late Show with David Letterman. Remember, they'd come on every season on Oprah to talk about the big summer movies, and it was on Oprah that Roger Ebert, I think both of them had said, I think it was in 1990, that George Lucas was going to go ahead and make the prequels were something that was a big announcement. They said Lucas was interested in making movies, and I remember that was on Oprah, and I think that was in 1990. But even more than that, when I think about Ebert, though, here's someone who, let's be very honest, if you were given that news, let's be honest, you get very gloomy, very depressed. Here's a guy who took one of the worst things. He beat it as better than anyone could. He could not talk anymore, something that he needed. He found other ways to do it. He utilized social media, new technology, in a way that I have seen no one do, and with such a ferocious vigor that it's inspiring. I don't care what you do in life or anything, you can't help but say this is one of the most inspirational people that you've come across. I mean, he's more than a survivor. I mean, he's not just a film writer. He was a writer. I think we all can say we don't label ourselves as film critics or film people. We're writers. We're interested in getting at something, and he
didn't let the cancer beat him. And he became even more prolific and productive after his first diagnosis. Right. Which is an amazing testament to the man. We have a caller. This is Chuck from Riverside, California. Hey, Chuck.
Hey. Great to have you guys, memorializing this genius
Thank you.
that he is. I'm just moved every day by what he does and by what he was able to do after being with the cancer and everything, and I just think that what he has done for film, what he's done for culture, really is just amazing. I mean, and the fact that after being, diagnosed with cancer, his prolificity was, tenfold of what it was before. That he attacked it with this vigor, and with wanting to show everybody, the greatest, and and it's what his love of film is so amazing. That he's an icon, he's an inspiration, and I just I'm in awe of.
We talk about this a lot because we've mentioned it a lot on the show, and that when we talk about film criticism, they're divided into two camps, really. And I think the snobbier critics, and this is a big reason why they went after Siskel and Ebert, because they mainstreamed film criticism in a certain way. But the snobbier critics, it seems like they walk into a movie wanting to know how they can tear it down. But Ebert always walked into a movie wanting to love it.
Yeah, completely agree. I think. Sorry, go ahead.
that's the thing that, another thing that he really personally affected me by. I mean, I think we talked about this, or I talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago about, meeting other film critics and having them, approach a movie with a chip on their shoulder, so to speak, and then, but I never feel that way about a film, and I always go into a movie wanting to love it, and I think I really did get that that quality from learning about not just movies, but just the art of analyzing a film through the work of Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. It's just
I mean, why else? I mean, I agree with all of you about that. I mean, and it's something I think we're all guilty of at certain times in our lives, not with just movies, but a lot of things. But why would you, that chip on your shoulder? And by the way, it's it's unavoidable. You go in some instances, whatever factor in your life, and whenever you have that chip on your shoulder, it's no good. It's no good.
Right.
No good can come from that. I'm speaking from personal experience. No good ever comes from that. But why worry? I realize critics, all right, even if you're not, like I think all of us or some of us, we still pay to go to the movie. So I don't pay for something knowing I'm going to hate it or wanting to hate it. That's a version of sadomasochism I just don't understand.
Well, but they were never so enthusiastic as when they both happened upon a film that they absolutely adored.
Adored. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Whether it be Fargo was a big one for them, Goodfellas.
Hoop Dreams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hoop Dreams, their passion for Hoop Dreams. Oh my God! I mean,
yeah. They put a lot of movies on the map. They did. They touted Do the Right Thing so strongly that I think they had that film enter the consciousness of
almost
a lot of people.
I wouldn't know who Wayne Lang was if it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
Now watching those early shows, I wouldn't know a lot of like Jim Jarmusch. I mean, I wouldn't know who those people were till much later had it not been for them.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Chuck, thank you so much, my friend, for calling in.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty, buddy. Have a good one.
Thank you.
It's really interesting. You mentioned the joy. They were often able to show joy about movies, but Ebert was also able to transmit a sense. When a movie really. I always think about their show that they did in the early '80s about the influx of horror movies like Friday the 13th and so forth, which they didn't like that movement because they thought it was ugly and frankly depressing. And I thought that's amazing that they were able to talk about something facet of movies that actually depressed them. Not just offended their taste, but just depressed them in the sense that what it said about people's movie-going habits and changing taste and so forth.
Well, I think it's what Roger Ebert said. It's what Roger Ebert said in the clip that we played at the very top of the show. There are different ways that a film can nourish you. But there has to be something shared, some shared experience that's worthwhile, that's worth sharing, and they found that movies like that were in extremely bad taste, and they called upon the most debased instincts of viewers, and they said so, But they talked about a lot of trends in movies. They talked about sex scenes in movies. They talked about homosexuality and how that's treated in movies. They covered women in movies. They covered a lot of topics in special shows that other people weren't really talking about. We have another caller. Let me take this other caller. This is Joe. Hey, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing good out here in San Jose. Yeah, it is a very sad day to lose such an icon as Roger Ebert, because as I said, I grew up watching their show every week, waiting to see, what movies they're going to talk about, what movies should I go and see, since by talking about horror movies, and I am a local cable horror host out in San Jose and stuff like that. And, I get the whole point of, society when you look at like many movies like the Friday the 13th series, and you just go like, well, okay, you know, I can agree with that, you know, because it is kind of like, okay, with the newer trends now, I don't know if, let's say, if they were both alive today, how they would feel about, you know, like movies like The Hostels or the Saw franchise and stuff like that. But I do say this because they're both wonderful people, and I enjoyed the show, and I'm really very touched and saddened by Roger's passing, and you know, and there's never going to be anyone quite like them ever again in our maybe in our lifetime.
No,
so
there isn't.
Really
but you know what's great? You know what's great, Joe, is the fact that in the last decade or so, however long it's been, what Roger Ebert did was he nurtured a lot of up and coming writers, and many of whom he found on the web. So just like Pauline Kael had the Paulettes, Roger Ebert had his own following of writers that will influence the future of criticism for decades to come. So he will always be out there in spirit in these other writers, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. But he was also something else that I think, and there are, I think as we've gotten more evolved with the people that he influenced, but he also engaged people. He engaged filmmakers. He engaged his readers. I mean, it wasn't just someone talking to you. There was an actual conversation going on. And I thought that was wonderful. It wasn't just like, I'm up here in the ivory tower or whatever. It was like, no, we're going to talk about this. And I think, like I said, he really did master social media in a way that I've never seen anyone else from his generation really tackle it with such gusto and really make people feel like, hey, I'm here to, you know, you're reading my stuff. Let's talk. You know, and I thought that was wonderful. I mean, you don't see that often. You don't see it that often in any field. You do have this sense, you still have this very ivory tower-like or boundary. He broke that boundary. He was like, no, you have to engage people. It can't just be the lone guy in the basement making the anonymous comments. It's like, no, you have to really engage people and have a conversation.
I would recommend two things. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I totally agree, because that's, you know, the foundation of any following of writers, actors, actresses, directors, filmmakers in general, is you got to put it, you know, get the people there that believe in whatever you're doing, whatever type of media it is, you know. It can't be, as you say, hey, I'm on my ivory tower and I'm, you know, it won't work if you're up that high and you know, think, oh, I'm the greatest thing since Wonder Bread, you know. It ain't. And that's why, you know, I'm so happy you guys are doing something like this for Roger, and I believe he's probably looking down going like, hey, thanks, guys, you know. And everyone is posting about his death and stuff like that, which it is very sad. And, again, I just wanted to say, guys, you're doing a great job. And that's all I really wanted to say is long live Roger and Cisco and everybody, and enjoy the rest of the show.
All right.
Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
You're welcome, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. There's two things I would recommend from Roger Ebert to get a sense of him and his special gifts and his special story. One is his autobiography, which is actually the reason why we did the show on him in 2011. It's called Life Itself, and a lot of it is taken from his various blogs, so you get great stories of how he grew up, how he fell in love with movies, all the famous people that he met, you know, sitting with Roger Mitchum or, you know, drinking with Roger Mitchum and all of this kind of stuff.
Right.
And you also get a lot of his life philosophy, as well as his feelings on Gene Siskel. The other thing, to really appreciate his detailed appreciation of movies, listen to his commentary on the Citizen Kane DVD or Blu-ray.
Right.
You know, he did a thing where he was one of the first to actually go to film schools, and then he had his own festival, Ebert Fest, and he would take a movie and he would examine it almost frame by frame.
Right.
And they would discuss it. Why did he make this choice? And Citizen Kane is absolutely one of those movies that he knew every frame of.
That's his favorite movie.
As you can tell from his commentary.
Yeah, no,
he nurtured so many directors. Ramin Barani, who has a new movie coming out soon called At Any Price,
right,
was one of the young directors that he adored. And actually, the one instance where we had a correspondence with Roger Ebert, he posted a link to our show where we interviewed Ramin Barani on one of his blogs. He posted it.
He actually tweeted about one of my articles on, at which I did an article about the 150 greatest endings to any movies out there, and he actually tweeted about that, and my hit level went up like 6,000 in one day.
That will help, man. That will definitely help.
I was like, what's going on? This is crazy. I traced it down. And so, I mean, that just shows you how complete he was, to go to my little blog, or whatever, and find something that he liked in it. He was really so enthusiastic about film, not just the films themselves, but talking about movies, and then of course with the onslaught of the internet, being able to be connected with so many other people who shared his passion for the medium. It was just amazing. I'm sure that I mean, obviously the internet was a great boon to him in the course of his battle with his disease. And it obviously was something clearly, the most important thing was Chaz, his wife.
Right.
But having the ability to connect with so many film lovers through the internet was just something that he obviously adored.
Right. No, he did it. I mean, I think he's a lesson, and I think actually, the industry, the medium that he so loved, which is so scared of, let's say all the old media, like the old media, is very frightened of the internet, and he embraced it. And I think they could all take a lesson and think, how can we embrace it like he did? Because he found a way to go wild with it and really increase his presence. And I think that's a lesson, one of the lessons of his life, and one of the most inspiring things. This is a guy who had faced all this adversity, and he triumphed in a way that is awe-inspiring. And it's like whenever you think that you are down and out, just look at him and say, look what he did. And it really is enough to get you going again. And he was a very inspirational figure to me. I couldn't get over it. When he went on Oprah with his wife that first time, I mean, you were just like, whatever I've got wrong in my life, this guy has a lot worse, and he has done so much, and I can go on.
And the bravery of that, I mean, any lesser person would have hidden from view, especially a writer.
Yeah.
A writer. But for him, and it all started with that Esquire article, if you remember, which was a brutally honest article, and it was the first time front and center that you saw the surgery and what it did to his jaw and his face. And he looked at it, and it was painful for him to see and to know that it was out there at first, but then he said, people need to know what this looks like. I'm not in hiding. This is what cancer does to you. And this is the reality of my life, which took such a bravery on his part. We have another caller. This is Cortland from Los Angeles. Let me bring him up. Hey, Cortland.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, as well as you can after hearing the news today. I don't know. I mean, I grew up. I mean, it's such a cliche, but I mean, I grew up with my folks watching, their show on PBS, and that's kind of how I got introduced to, Gene and Roger, and so I kind of feel like I've known them since I was, like 6 or 7 years old, and obviously it was really sad when Gene passed away back in '99, and then it's almost, I guess, like you guys were talking about, since he's been like so prolific talking on his blog about like his health and stuff, you feel like you actually know him versus like just know his writings, his film reviews, and of course I cut my teeth reading his books, when he every year he would put out his new his yearly books, and my parents bought those for me when I was a kid, like all the early ones that came out like in the late 80s and early 90s. That's kind of how I got introduced to a lot of those movies, and yeah, I mean, he might not necessarily be a critic I agree with most, but I always sought out to see what he said about a movie. And it's, all the tributes today from like the different like obits from other critics, and the Onion one was surprisingly poignant. I don't know if you guys saw that one, but I don't know, it's I'm trying not to, I'm trying not to cry, honestly, and it sounds kind of crazy because I never met the man, but it's just a really sad time, and I guess I'm glad he was here longer than Gene was, because Gene really passed too young,
Yeah, he did.
At least Roger made it to 70. Gene was 53 when he passed away.
That's right.
But anyway,
yeah,
I guess I'll hang out and listen to you guys talk. But yeah, I guess I just feel the need to share it with someone.
No, well, thank you for
none
calling.
of my friends really feel the same about it that I do. But yeah,
that's the thing about being a movie geek. Only fellow movie geeks understand us.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, and Roger Ebert was the king film geek in a big way. He lived in it. So, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Portland. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Bye bye.
Ewan Daly in our chat room just reminded us of the filmed bio autobiography or whatever that Stephen James, the director of Hoop Dreams, and Martin Scorsese and Steven Zaillian are planning to produce on Roger Ebert. So that's something to look forward to.
They're currently working on it, and that's based on his book Life Itself. So I'm sure that movie now has a very unfortunate but moving last chapter, given his passing today. And that was one of the things that he was taking a leave of presence to work on too. He said, "I'm gonna have a lot of involvement in this film that's going on of my life." So I want to ask you guys about your favorite Roger Ebert reviews, whether it be on the show or in writing. Let me preface this with a list that just came out from Jezebel.com. Roger Ebert's 20 best reviews. And I think this was just put together, in recent hours. So it's probably not comprehensive, but I think they picked the funniest kind of stuff from Roger Ebert. On Gone with the Wind, Roger Ebert said, Rhett Butler tells Scarlett in a key early scene, "You need kissing badly. That's what's wrong with you. You should be kissed and often and by someone who knows how. For kissed, substitute the word you're thinking of." Dances with Wolves, Roger Ebert says, "It has the kind of vision and ambition that is rare in movies today. It is not a formula movie, but a thoughtful, carefully observed story. It is a Western at a time when the Western is said to be dead. It asks for our imagination and sympathy. It takes its time to unfold. It is a personal triumph for Kevin Costner, the intelligent young actor of Field of Dreams, who directed the film and shows a command of story and a visual structure that is startling. This movie moves so confidently and looks so good, it seems incredible that it's a directorial debut." On the movie Valentine's Day, he says, "Valentine's Day is being marketed as a date movie. I think of it more as a first date movie. If your date likes it, do not date that person again." Oh, that's a beautiful quote. On Pirates of the Caribbean 4, "At least no movie has yet been inspired by It's a Small World." So tell me what your favorite Ebert reviews are, guys.
Oh gosh, I mean, single reviews is difficult to say. I mean, I do think I did buy the 2 volumes of his bad movie reviews. The ones that he really hated.
Oh, yeah,
I think one of them was called "I hated this movie." And I found that fascinating. He might be the only film critic out there that's released a volume of bad movie reviews. Negative movie reviews. But I just I'm not really a fan of writing negative movie reviews. I find it a depressing thing to do. But he's able to as the consummate writer that he is, he's able to find some joy in it. I mean, if the movie itself can't bring you some joy, then at least his review of the movie can.
Right.
I think that's something. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, it's you know, to pick a favorite review of his, you know, is difficult for me, and in some ways because I have to admit my main relationship with Roger Ebert as a fan really comes from watching the television show, and yes, I did read his writing a whole lot, but I haven't become like a.
Well, no, I'm talking about even
scholar.
the television show, like the Siskel Ebert television show. Even if there's a favorite review you had from there.
Oh God! I mean, you know, there's just oh gosh, I'm kind of like at a loss at the moment, but. All I can say is, you know, I loved every minute that they were on screen. That's all I can say. It's just every minute with both of those guys was just pure gold to me. And you know, I thank the lucky stars that, you know, I'm still able to go onto YouTube and go and revisit some of those some of those reviews and some of those episodes. I mean, you know, I always remember them. I think the thing that I remember most was on their show was their battle over Full Metal Jacket.
That clip is actually coming up. Actually, we're going to play that.
Oh yeah, no, that's
I mean, their battle over Full Metal Jacket was like an epic film review battle to me, and I think that might be one of my very, very favorite moments from them.
Jerry, how about you?
Well, I remember. I mean, I can't say like written wise. I've read a lot of books by him. I haven't read the memoir yet because I was waiting for it to come out in paperback, and I'm just sorry. Disposable income is not at its height right now, so you got to forgive me for not picking that up yet. But I will say this: their review of The Godfather Part 3, I think, is the quintessential review because they both liked it, but the reasoning, you know, they wanted you to go in with diminished expectations, you know, but they're like, it's good to see these people again, first of all. It's like hanging out with family was something they both agreed on. It was like really good to be back with the family. Then they said something else, though, that I'm afraid, and it's very important what they said. It goes, they use this as, I think, their justification for liking the movie. It's much better than anything else out there right now. Like most of the current state of movies, even though it's not like, obviously it's not like the first two, there's a mastery there. There's a level of filmmaking there that you don't see a lot of it. I mean, the exception would be, you know, Goodfellas would be the one thing that you would say at the time was far superior. But I like that, but I also, the first show I ever watched by them, sneak previews, this must have been in 79 or 80, they did a special on, like, science fiction movies, and I got hooked watching that, and they would do all these, like, special shows, but when they hated stuff, and I don't know if it was their show, or remember I think it was Neil Gabler and Jeffrey Lyons placed in on, I don't know which it was, but they reviewed that they came out with a Godzilla movie in the mid-'80s, and one of them just said, I would have rather seen Raymond Burr stomp on all the buildings. This movie sucked.
You know what's the value of that, though? Because they were never, I mean, other than the film that we already talked about, something like Fargo or Goodfellas, when they were very excited to see something break through, something revelatory, the value of reviewing obviously bad movies, and they had such a delight, it seemed, or as a viewer you had a delight in watching them review bad movies, is because they are really playing with the people that make movies, make better movies. and they were calling out the studio execs and the creative talents that were completely misguided and not using the form of filmmaking as they should have. That was the value of the bad reviews they did. The most delectable bad review they did was Jaws: The Revenge.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! Yeah!
Oh my gosh! It was just great. And in terms of writing, I mean, I collected all the Roger Ebert books and read them voraciously. So I really liked what he wrote about Last Tango in Paris. I thought it was very observant, and especially for someone that liked Pauline Kael as much as Roger Ebert did in terms of her writing style. If you're reviewing Last Tango in Paris after Pauline Kael has a crack at it, which that was probably her most legendary review, it's a hard act to follow. But he found insights into that movie that Pauline Kael hadn't even expressed in her review. And I thought that was a special one. Yeah.
In that book, I think you remember in the book that came out, I think it was in '96, his movie book that came out, and he republished the Pauline Kael and then the Norman Mailer review. Isn't that the one where he does that? And the contrast is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I love
that. He was very observant and insightful, and yet he still wrote for the people. He still wrote for the masses. You know?
Right. That's what I liked about his writing. Yeah, I love the breezy aspect of his writing. That's something that I think every writer about film wants to have. You know, that sort of ability to remain intelligent, but yet not talk over the heads of people. To keep things very simple, but also very incisive and very detailed and honest. Honesty is the biggest thing. You know, it's through his whole life. I mean, you know, the honesty was one of his biggest virtues. You know,
another critic I like, I couldn't say these things about, but I think he's very, David Thompson, and I read his books, and I like him. I disagree with 99.9% of what he has to say, but he's very intelligent about it. But he doesn't have that, how should I say, he doesn't have that way of connecting. He is kind of the stereotype we talk about, especially if you read any entry in the Biographical Dictionary of Film. I mean, some of it's brilliant, but some of it's downright brutal. But he doesn't have that. I mean, I respect him and everything, but, he doesn't. I think Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, both of them had that ability to talk, that it wasn't some mystifying thing. They could level with people and talk to them and bring them into the conversation, and I always thought that was great. And you see that with the new generation. You see that with a lot of people, a lot of people that we've had on the show, a lot of our regulars. You see that. They have a way of connecting with people, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, there will be a lot of... Go ahead.
I wanted to say this. I think they had a major influence on television itself, too. I mean, that relationship that they had on that show was something so unique that if you look at the decades that have passed since the show has been on the air, you see a lot more of attempts, and a lot of them are not very successful, of TV executives trying to pair together certain personalities and see if they can have that kind of magic that Siskel and Ebert had, but in the realm of news and
I was thinking
politics
about that earlier
and things like that. So it's like, their effect on not just the medium of movies, but the medium of television too is like it's just, you can't even calculate it.
You can't. No one. Yeah.
It's like pre-Siskel and Ebert and post-Siskel and Ebert, really.
Dean, are you like talking about like when they started on CNN, started Crossfire?
Yeah.
And then you have the whole news medium, but it's basically become the cable news cycle. It's like they all forgot why that worked. Because, yes, they disagree with each other, and they fought, but they were, at the end of the day, very civil. But whereas Crossfire, it just became a blood sport. And then Crossfire, by today's standards, is rather tame. But that's what I was thinking about that earlier today. It was Siskel and Ebert brought this new dynamic, and yet it was, at the end of the day, when all of a sudden it was very civil, it was fun. They had their barbs at each other and everything. And then the cable news comes along. You have Crossfire, you have Hannity and Combs. I can go. I mean, any news anything that's going to be O'Reilly Factor, what have you, Glenn Beck, and it all became just viciousness.
Well, you know what they did was what those pretenders did was pay attention to the things that I think got Siskel and Ebert first noticed, which was their sense of how they could go at each other during a review, and they could make some pretty stinging barbs that were thrown at each other. And those were fun and made were something completely new for TV. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't all that they were. I mean, they would have much preferred to have been totally in cahoots with every movie that they saw, and particularly in cahoots with just the good stuff. You know, exactly. I mean, I think they honestly just wanted to see good stuff all the time, and I think they probably enjoyed those shows more where they were able to get together and actually be a voice for movies that they loved and to tell the world about them. And, and so that's the thing that, you know, those other shows are missing, is that there's only the sniping and there's no joy. There's none. So that's what, you know.
The only one who took off of that was when Bill Maher did Politically Incorrect. I think he somewhat succeeded on that format. Yes. Somewhat. I mean, but not to the extent that I think, and that's even tame by today's standards.
Here's a piece of trivia for you. What was the first movie they reviewed on Sneak Previews?
Gosh, that must have been like in 75 or something, right?
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Wow, really? That's the first movie they.
Yeah, they viewed it at the Chicago Film Festival, I believe, and that was their first review on their first show.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that clip is online, actually.
I'm stunned that I knew that.
in just a bit, we're going to take Aaron's call, and Aaron's going to share some thoughts on Roger Ebert's passing. Obama came out with a statement today, said, Michelle and I are saddened to hear about the passing of Roger Ebert. For a generation of Americans, and especially Chicagoans, Roger was the movies. When he didn't like a film, he was honest. When he did, he was effusive, capturing the unique power of the movies to take us somewhere magical. Even amidst his own battles with cancer, Roger was as productive as he was resilient, continuing to share his passion and perspective with the world. The movies won't be the same without Roger, and our thoughts and prayers are with Chaz and the rest of the Ebert family. David Thompson, film critic, film writer, said, it is characteristic of Roger Ebert, speechless for some years, that he should take his life departure just a day after admitting that he would have to drop down from doing 300 reviews a year. Yeah. He was as prolific as they come.
Yeah.
Let's take Aaron's call. Aaron, hey buddy.
Hey Aaron.
Hey. How you doing?
So I read a post from you today about, I mean, Roger Ebert was very responsible for igniting your love of movies and criticism.
Yeah, it's the same story, kid who, loved movies, but then you start watching the show. I started sporadically watching the show, I guess, in the summer of '87. I have a vivid memory of watching the episode where they review Arthur 2 and Short Circuit 2. And you figure, you're watching adults, these are real adults at this time. What am I? I'm like 8 going on 9. And you figure they're not going to like these movies, Short Circuit 2, because, it's not made for them, and then they go and give that 2 thumbs up. And so you're kind of like taken aback by when they do like something like that, because that's usually not, usually the the little you do know, or the little I did know of film criticism or movie criticism, adults didn't like those types of movies, but they said no, it's a good movie. And then I remember, I guess it was summer '88 is when I became I don't know what happened. I think what happened was I finally found out that the station and the time it was on every week, as opposed to where it always gets shuffled around. So I never missed it, and so I remember their Roger Ebert review. And
do you have a favorite review?
Favorite review? Well, yeah. The one that changed me. Cause it was a confluence of the review that changed me, of the movie that changed me, and that was their rave of Goodfellas. That was when I started recording the show on VHS. I started recording the show, and I remember I recorded that episode, and I remember the whole thing. It was Goodfellas, Narrow Margin, Funny About Love, and the tall guy, and then there was a special segment on Spike Lee about the criticism that he was receiving on anti-Semitism for Mo Better Blues. And so, I remember that show vividly, but it was Goodfellas. I had just seen the movie the Saturday, it opened that weekend, so I saw it Saturday afternoon, and I was 11, about to turn 12. Didn't fully understand all the implications of the movie, but I knew I'd seen something special, and I was obsessed with the movie. And then, Sunday night, it was in my market, it was a Sunday night show, like at 1 a.m. So I would have to record it because I'd have to be, I had school in a few hours. And of course, there were those nights when it was something really big of a movie. My parents would let me stay up till 1 to watch the show. But I remember the Goodfellas when I recorded it, so I'd come home from school and I'd watch it, and they raved about it, and it just reinforced everything that I thought about Goodfellas, and it just made me experience it more. And I tell you, the other episode that had a lasting impact was it was a late April, I think it was a late April show, 1993, and that's when they did their Golden Age of the 70s show, where they picked.
I remember watching that.
Yeah, 1970 to 1974, and so so they're talking about one film each from each of them from that year, and they're talking about it. And so I remember after that summer, I rented those. So I'm like 14 that summer, so I'm renting King of Chinatown, and I'd seen Chinatown, but I'm renting Fat City and Last Picture Show and some of their other the Long Goodbye, if you could find a Long Goodbye. Altman films, some of those Altman films were out of circulation, but I remember that show was really big, and I started taping those types of movies that were on. They would come up on the movie channel at 2 a.m, and then and the thing, people, that show is 5 years before the publication of Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. So they, before Peter Biskin, really, kind of enshrined that era. Siskel and Ebert had done this show, really, espousing the virtues of it, and and I remember that was a big show, and that that was always one of my favorite. I would rewatch that show a lot. I'd save that one and I rewatch it quite a bit. And there was no snobbery and there was no discrimination, and not just in the fact that they would like mass commercial films, but the other way that there were some films that everyone was loving that they didn't get. They didn't.
Ebert didn't quite get Godfather 2. I recall. He wasn't insane about that movie.
No, he gave it 3 stars. He gave it a positive review, and it wasn't until I think much 30 years later. I don't know if it became part of the Great Movie series, but I remember in a later article, he did say he has revived his opinion on Godfather 2. But yeah, another one he didn't like that he also, I know he said he was wrong at the time, was All That Jazz. He said he thought it was at the time he thought it was an 8.5 knockoff, which obviously on the surface it was an 8.5 knockoff. But he said later on he was wrong about all that jazz. And so they didn't discriminate. I mean, these are the guys. Before horror was fashionable, they were raving about Halloween and Dawn of the Dead. Those were lucky to get the main, the top critics in their, in the publication to review those. Those weren't considered deemed well-to-do review movies. These guys, they had Purple Rain on their top 10 lists. Both of them, and the Cotton Club.
Did any other film critic ever win a Pulitzer? Other than Ebert?
There's been a couple since, like in the last decade. But for the longest time, it was just it's been Ebert, and I know Joe Morgenstern was nominated for one, and so forth. So for the longest time, it was Ebert, and so they really, and so there was no real hatefulness. The only thing they ever hated were bad movies. There's no hatefulness in there, even when they within their spirit. And that's what that was their legacy. There are people who decry the show that the show ruined film criticism. And if you're going to take that stand, then the only way you can take that stand is if you delete everything else Siskel and especially Ebert did beyond that show. You have to delete their print work and everything else, and their scholarly work. You have to obliterate all that if you're going to say the show ruined film criticism, and that just doesn't hold water because you have to take it all. You have to take the good and the bad. And so yes, were there people who grew up who said I want to be popular and be on TV like Siskel and Ebert? Probably, but to decry that show and to decry what they did and how they got people to read and think about movies, on through television, through the television medium, it's the same mentality that decries Jaws and Star Wars and Titanic as great movies because because you're going to bemoan all the imitations that are going to come after it from Hollywood.
Well, I think it's also the limitation of the television format. I mean, and they were very well aware of that. There's no way to cover a movie in 6 minutes without being reduced to sound bites. So, but it didn't allow for a level of immersion that your writing would allow for.
Exactly.
That was just the nature of the beast. But
and so they did all of that, and so they were print people first. They were newspapermen first, and I'm almost certain that if Siskel had lived to this point, he would have been a late adopter to the multimedia. But he, the way that Ebert was an early adopter, they were polar opposites, and there hasn't been that kind of discord. I mean, it saddens me that it does sadden me that Ebert is gone. It does sadden me, but because to think that in their void is guys like, Armand or Devin Faraci. These are not the legacies that Siskel and Ebert, and particularly Ebert, wanted to inspire. So,
but
as we said earlier,
credit though. I mean, he does come across mean-spirited, but I like him a lot more. I mean, I like Devin a lot. I like what he does. I mean, no, he doesn't. I don't agree with a lot of his things, but I do like what he does. But I understand what you're saying. There is a void there, but I don't think we have you, we have Dean, we have Keith, we have Matt, we have all these guys who've been on the show, and we have. I mean, I don't begrudge Devin anything. Armand, I mean, I don't think I've agreed with anything he's ever said, but he's there.
Armand actually took a swipe at Ebert again just last week in one of his reviews.
Oh God, what did he say?
He did. What was that?
For Room 237. He just made a comment that this is the idiotic thing that substitutes for film culture, and unfortunately it's the film culture that Roger Ebert invented. But he always took an opportunity to swipe. But there are enough Ebert disciples, as we said earlier, that I think that will carry on.
I mean, just look at I assume it's y'all's news feed on Facebook. Just look at everyone who has come out without using any kind of measured, word count or measured terms. It's just been kind of all out there. People remembering Ebert and testifying to his influence. So I mean, it's kind of like in a weird way. Just off the top of my head, it reminds me of the when Tony Scott died. You always wait for the one stars like to say, we didn't get along, but I did admire him. No one ever came out and said I didn't get along with Tony Scott. There was not one bad person that came out.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with some tough people. So that tells you. So it tells you a lot when they pass on the level of just outpouring that comes out, and
right.
It's just been a few hours, and it's just and that is, and it's from the level. It's from from the bloggers to the print critics, from the film comment, cineast, CinemaScope crowd to some would-be upstart blogger who who doesn't know Ebert from print, only knows him from his Twitter feed and his site. Ebert was all inclusive, and that's what movies were all about.
Yeah.
Should be.
Well, I think the only person that you've mentioned who isn't all-inclusive is Armand. Everyone else that I think, Armand really is the great divider. But I want to say something else. You brought up something very good about Ebert and Siskel both came from print, and they are able to, make it in television. And it's something very hard. Jimmy Breslin, remember, tried to do a talk show, a late-night talk show. It failed miserably. A lot of great journalists. Hitchens never had his own talk show, but he was very good on TV, but I don't know if he could carry a show. But it's has there ever been, outside of Siskel and Ebert, has there ever been a successful long-running show about movies?
No.
Okay, these guys hit the dirt. They really did an excellent job.
Well, it was also partially due to they had fantastic voices. Let's just say that they had fantastic they could have been on the radio. Their voices were just so magnificent, and so they were not only a joy to listen to take. It wasn't just a joy just to take in their ideas and their opinions, but also just to listen to them was rather musical in a lot of ways, and I think that's probably something that keeps other people from succeeding. Because when you go back and you take a look at all of the pretenders, the Dixie Watleys and the Rex Reeds, they tried to do it, and then Jeffrey Lyons and Michael Medved.
Oh, don't get me started on Michael Medved. Oh my God!
None of those guys could ever hope to do what these guys did. They just did not have it. They did not have the magic.
You don't know if Siskel and Ebert were separated and put on their own show. It probably wouldn't have lasted 30 years. It was the fact that there was that undeniable and indefinable chemistry that they had that you cannot manufacture. It just and these two were rivals for all intents and purposes.
Right.
Before they got together and during their relationship, it felt
and that's
like it
probably. And I've always said that was the key.
Yeah.
To the whole show was that Chicago newspaper rivalry between the two of them, because just anecdotally when Ebert tried to do it, when he did it with Roper and all that, he needed and it wasn't good. He needed someone who didn't care what the other guy thought. The key was neither one of them cared what the other guy thought. Both of them thought they were right.
Yeah.
But the thing was, they both knew that they needed the other one for the show to work.
Oh, absolutely.
So
that's a great point.
If you combine that they knew that they needed each other for the show to work, but they also believed emphatically that they were right and the other guy was wrong, that was the key to the success. So when you get someone like a Roper or some of the other critics who came in who are a little on the, kind of reverential side, it tipped the balance toward Ebert more.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time it didn't is on the couple occasions when there were some guest critics who were secure in their opinions and secure in their other jobs, that they just did it as a lark. Elvis Mitchell did it. Wesley Morris comes to mind. Lisa Schwartzbaum, I thought, was one of the best. She did it a couple of times, and she was the one who would, she didn't mind, challenging Ebert, and so it was those who weren't concerned about being reverential that had a little bit of chemistry.
Right.
But then you had, workout boy Richard Roper come on the show, and he just didn't. It didn't.
All right, we're about to close the show with the previous show we did on Siskel and Ebert from September of 2011. Spike Lee just tweeted, "I miss my dear friend Roger Ebert. Roger was one of the first major movie critics to support my films, especially Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing. He was a champion of Spike Lee. He was a champion of Werner Herzog. He was crazy about Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog directed one of his all-time favorite movies, which was a documentary called Gates of Heaven."
No, that's Errol Morris. Yeah.
Errol Morris. I'm so sorry.
Errol Morris. I would never have known who Errol Morris was for a long time
exactly.
had it not been for that show about that.
Yeah, that's one of the most memorable reviews, I would say, is the Gates of Heaven.
And let's just say, and I assume more episodes will get posted in the coming days and weeks, but I think yesterday or 2 days ago, the SiskelandEbert.org website, they posted the At the Movies sneak previews episode from 1981, which had Reds and the first review of My Dinner with Andre.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's another one. My Dinner with Andre was a huge one. Big one.
We all know, know the story. There is different stories on the timeline on that, but I mean, the myth goes that the shows weren't selling out for My Dinner with Andre in New York. Siskel and Ebert review airs, I think it's like Friday, and then by literally the following day, the show is sold out from the Siskel and Ebert review on My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to play there for, I think, a year or something, and it just goes on wherever it plays. It just plays for weeks and weeks, months and months on end. And My Dinner with Andre was, it's always held up as, that's always the classic Siskel and Ebert helping a little movie that could. For my generation, for us, I think it's One False Move.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Aaron. Absolutely. I remember that. That's how I first heard about it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that just touches on another of their big effects on the on the movie industry too. Is just their ability they transformed the world of movie marketing. Let's just say that. I mean, before Siskel and Ebert, you very, very rarely saw movie ads in the newspaper that were touting critical reaction. You might see one, around December or something, around the holidays or around the Oscar times. But post Siskel and Ebert, and post the two thumbs up, brand that they had, it became sort of de rigueur in ads to tout, what critics were saying, and they actually kind of took the place of ad copy and ad writing. They became so huge. Their stamp of approval became so huge that it was a selling point all its own. And still to this day, you see movie ads, and they're still touting. They still have quote outs from critics and so forth. But it's just not the same as having that two thumbs up thing.
Or the Lost Highway, 2 thumbs down. Remember they would advertise Lost Highway, 2 thumbs down. That was classic.
Amazing.
Okay, we're going to close out the show. Roger Ebert did an interview with Salon Magazine. I think he actually did it with Salon Magazine, or maybe it doesn't come from Salon Magazine, but they've certainly redistributed the quote. I suppose he was asked about death, and he says, "I know it is coming, and I do not fear it, because I believe there is nothing on the other side of death to fear. I hope to be spared as much pain as possible on the approach path. I was perfectly content before I was born, and I think of death as the same state. I'm grateful for the gifts of intelligence, love, wonder, and laughter. You can't say it wasn't interesting." So that's Roger Ebert. So we all thank Roger Ebert for the role he played in our lives, igniting our passion for movies that will continue until we pass on, I'm sure.